Hello, everyone, and welcome to the EDI Catalyst, where we will explore topics of equity, diversity, inclusion, and indigeneity in STEM. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Albright, and I'm excited to share with you this new initiative spearheaded by the Carbon to Metal Coating Institute here at Queen's University. At C2MCI, we are committed to advancing EDII in STEM fields by fostering a culture of respect, inclusion, and excellence among our researchers, students, and partners. In this podcast, we will feature guest speakers from diverse backgrounds and perspectives, discussing their lived experiences, as well as provide some resources and tips on how to create more inclusive and equitable environments. Through this, we hope to inspire you to become a catalyst for change in your own communities and workplaces. A few notes before we get started. As always, there'll be time at the end of the session for any of our members of the live audience to ask questions or add comments. So please remain muted until then. You can also use the chat function as well. So our theme for today is really fitting since we just celebrated International Women's Day. So we are celebrating women in STEM, and I'm honored and excited to have Dr. Lucia Lee joining me for today's discussion. Dr. Lee is an assistant professor here at Queen's University in the Department of Chemistry and was recently awarded the Gilead Award for Excellence in EDI from the Canadian Institute of Chemistry. So hopefully we'll discuss a little bit about that. So welcome, Lucia. Congratulations on your award. How are you today?
Good. Thanks so much for inviting me as a guest speaker. It's really an honor to be part of this series. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really happy you're able to join us today and kind of discuss.
hmm
So let's start off, as I always do, with can you tell everyone a little more about yourself and what your journey in STEM has been so far?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lucia Lee. As Emily said, I'm currently a tenure track assistant professor at Queen's University in the Department of Chemistry. I'm a Korean immigrant. My family moved to Canada when I was 12. Hopefully today we'll get to discuss kind of like the language and cultural barrier that I sort of experienced and took it as a challenge. Throughout my journey in STEM, I did my PhD at bachelor's and PhD at McMaster University. I was very inspired by my fourth year thesis supervisor, Dr. Ignacio Vargas, who also happens to be an immigrant. He's from Mexico. So having him as a mentor whose first language isn't English, and he was a great speaker, and his writing skill always amazed me, and he was always there for me to it was someone that I kind of looked up to as I carried out my journey in chemistry. So that's where I did my bachelor's and PhD at McMaster University. And then I kind of went abroad, that which we'll talk about, I guess, a little bit later, that I kind of got out of Canadian side and got to experience what the chemistry is like in different countries such as Switzerland and Israel. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dive more into those things. So maybe I'm going to share, since I'm also a woman in STEM, I'm going to share a little bit about my experiences as well. So you kind of touched on what inspired you. So some of the things that stick out to me in my journey and why I'm kind of where I am today first starts with support from my parents growing up. So I had two sisters, so oftentimes we would do the traditionally boy activities with my dad. And I think that instilled for me at an early age that it doesn't matter if I'm a girl or woman, I can do whatever I want as long as I'm passionate about it and work hard and able to learn, then you can do whatever you want. And the second biggest thing that I think I owe to my um, journey in STEM was the strong representation I had of other women in STEM. So in my high school, I had my biology, chemistry, and physics teachers were all female. Most of them had attended graduate studies as well. Um, and then in my university career as well, I had a lot of really strong female scientists. But one thing I want to comment on that was key in all of those people were they were always so passionate about their field. And I think their passion then made them want to pass that on to the next generation. And that really affected me. And I think I owe a lot of why I got into science to them. So shout out to my high school teachers, but then also I want to shout out Dr. Val Reeves, who's the first year chemistry teacher at UMB. She is also another great chemist who has that passion and um, wanting to pass that on to the students and engagement and support for her students. And then, of course, the supervisors in my master and PhD as well. Once I kind of gotten earlier into my bachelor degree, really helped my journey in chemistry and so forth. So those were my two key things that
Yeah.
inspired me in my interest. So,
Hmm.
but I think it's important to note too, not only women in STEM, but because there's lots of representation now, I think, in that regard, but I think there was a lot of people
Hmm.
who've gone through where there's not always a woman to look up to. And I think that's your case too, right, Lucia? You had male supervisors in your journey?
I did. Yeah, who's all of them were very supportive of my career choices and um especially my PhD supervisor um whom I still keep in close contact with. So every time I have questions, he's always there to, give me the best advice that he can. So having that mentor figure in your life is very important, and hopefully I can become one for other students as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's a really important part in STEM, especially. I think you need that support, whether that's parents, supervisors, colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah, of
So can
course.
you,
And yeah, sorry. My family has always been very supportive
mm,
of what I studied. Yeah, my parents are actually not scientists at all. They're
mm,
more into interior design. So I kind of grew up looking at a lot of patterned garments. So I always was fascinated by looking at different colored patterns, and I think that kind of translated into my passion for chemistry, especially when it came to X-ray crystallography, right? You're looking at
mm,
the unit cell patterns that are repetitive, right? That as well. And I have a younger brother who also studied chemistry, but he's in industry.
mm.
Yeah, he's also been sort of a supportive figure throughout my journey as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So that's another thing to consider too. So were you the first person in your family to go to university for science?
For science, yeah, both of my parents studied economics and commercial. So yeah, I was sort of the first person to study science. Yeah.
So that comes with challenges too, I'm sure. So, well, I feel the same way. I was the first one to pursue in my family higher education as well.
Mm.
So maybe because you discussed like English as your second language and being an immigrant, can you talk about some of the challenges you faced with that and kind of how you overcame those?
Yeah. So when I first came to Canada, I didn't speak very much English. I still remember when I was doing little like my skills test and I couldn't spell eight like EIGHT. That's how bad it was. Um, but at every stage, high school, middle school, there were always sorry, not students, teachers who were willing to go out of their way to give me that extra help that I needed to get the coursework done. So there was always help available. So I guess I kind of learned how to navigate problems, but also asking for help. I know it sounds really cliche, but asking for help can be sometimes challenging depending on what kind of personality you have. I know I tend to be quite quiet, so asking for help was always I had to like, pump up myself and ask for help. So that's also important in STEM that when you feel like you're stuck or you're having problems, you're not on your own, but you also need to voice your challenges so people around you can help you out as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then
yeah.
at the university level, that was a whole different language barrier I faced because now you have your own lecture notes and um, it's quite different from high school. So that transition, I struggled quite a bit. But at the same time, I think being an immigrant, that led me to develop my own strength in like tackling problems. I'm not really scared to a new environment or new thing. If I have to learn it, I will just get to work and learn it. So sort of that adaptability skills came with from those personal experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what was the comment there that you said? Oh, it'll come back to me. But I think I'm always so I grew up in a bilingual province, but I am
Hmm.
not bilingual at all. And I really struggled to learn other languages. So I have a huge appreciation for people who are multilingual, and that was kind of exemplified for me. I did an exchange in Japan where English is not the native language there. They speak Most people speak Japanese there. Um, so it was really eye-opening for me to be on the other side of that as a student. And one situation stuck out to me too. They got one of the master students there to present his chemistry in English to us, and he was just still learning English. And I was so impressed his first go. He did so well for barely ever presenting in English. And I thought, oh my goodness, if they asked me to present in Japanese, I wouldn't even begin to be able to do that. So I think it's really important to point that out and think about like if these students who are coming and English isn't their first language, that's a huge barrier for them. And if they're talking to you in English, you guys should be very impressed because I that's how I felt anyways. Um, so you also traveled for your postdoctoral work. Can you kind of share what your experience was about with that and kind of what you learned and took from that like studying abroad experience?
Yeah. So my first postdoc was in Geneva, Switzerland. So it was at the University of Geneva. Very different setting, different culture, but I guess the common theme throughout my postdoc experience was that I was always surrounded by people who are very enthusiastic and passionate about research and science. But it was really cool to meet all these people who share the same type of passion, but they all come from different backgrounds. So I guess that really helped me to broaden my personal perspective on research and in terms of all these EDI initiatives, made me think about how to communicate different topics with different people with different backgrounds. Um, so Switzerland met a lot of European colleagues in the group. And then my second postdoc was in Israel, so in the Middle East, very different culture. But also the institute that I worked in Israel was research institute rather than an academic university.
Mm.
So that was also a quite interesting experience as to how research is being conducted at a research institution rather than a university. So that also helped me to understand um, how research is being done outside of a university, and that uh, yeah, and then from there you get to meet not just researchers but a lot of different staff and admins and things like that. But there are also, I was surrounded with people who were incredibly supportive and who share the same type of enthusiasm and passion for science as I did. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that there's some differences between um the different cultures and how that can you talk about maybe some examples that stuck out to you from when you went to Israel, for example? Because I think that one would probably be a significant cultural difference compared to here in
Yeah,
Canada.
yeah. So I have to say I felt for my age, I was probably very few postdocs without any children. Israeli culture is very different from North American or current European cultures, they've started family pretty young. So people in my ages, they already had 2 or 3 children, and it was really great to see how these women with children were supported and still supported to do their research. And the amount of help and support that institute had that openly available for these female scientists, that having a family, having children should not be a barrier to do your studies. So it really arranged financial support to having on-site daycare for younger children, or having after daycare hour services that was offered at the institute, and just sort of a, a general understanding that I will come 8 o'clock in the morning, but I have to leave at 3 or 4 to pick up my kids, and that's okay as long as you get the work done. So it was really great to see um, that kind of support for women with family and children. And I felt like that should be more, yeah, those experiences, I mean, sorry, those initiatives could be maybe more implemented in North American culture. That's what I learned. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that is still in North America a huge challenge for a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
women in science and chemistry specifically too, because then you have that layer of safety in the lab as well. So then you need to make
Mm-hmm.
sure, like as an institute or your faculty supervisors at that
Mm-hmm.
level are open and willing to make sure that your lab is safe for you and doing these different accommodations. Um, but it's really interesting to hear that in a different culture that they are very supportive of that. Um,
Yeah.
because that hasn't been like experienced here. Like I think we're
Yeah.
starting to get better at that and there is more of those initiatives happening, but I still
Yeah.
don't think it's as widely accepted as what you're indicating that it was in your experience. So I think that's a really
Yeah.
important thing to
Yeah. I think
discuss.
it's Yeah, I think it's definitely improving, and especially having this sort of a lot of EDI initiatives that are being promoted and that are being discussed. I think the more communication will definitely help us to get there and have better understandings of each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the awareness and raising the awareness is the only way things move forward.
Hmm.
Uh, so, 'cause since we're talking about other strategies, so what are some things that you've started to implement in your own lab or teaching to help promote EDI initiatives and strategies?
Yeah. I I wouldn't say a strategy, but I try to be, at least I try to be. I don't know if I'm succeeding it, but I try to be down to earth for many students. If students come in and express, I'm having trouble with this because of that and because of that, and I always try to see their problem from their perspective, and that's also because I've also struggled during universities. Like I said, like university courses that's completely different from high school. I think we all experience that, right? But there's also like that cultural language barrier that I've experienced at the same time. So I think having this yeah, try to build sort of like a personal relationship with students, so that I can understand um, the root of their problems and how we can solve it together so they can succeed in my course or things like that. Yeah, I guess that's my strategy.
Yeah, I think too, I don't know if this is something you do, but I know it's something I've experienced from my supervisors in the past is I'm also shy sometimes and struggle with expressing when I'm having challenges or issues. So one thing I know that helped me in that from my supervisors was when they would check in with me, because sometimes it's all about research and we often don't think about, if we're struggling with anything. So I found it was really helpful when my supervisors would reach out to me and not just dig into what's struggling with chemistry, but how are you doing with things? Is life good? Is everything going
Yeah,
smoothly? And
yeah.
I think that comes from building that relationship, like you're saying, and
Hmm.
being open to your students. Yeah, I think that's really great. Is there anything that you do in like, so I think you teach a lot of courses right now as well. Is there things that you've done specifically in the classroom to try to help students?
Yeah, so right now I'm teaching a big class for the very first time. It has like 250 students in it. Um, so I think from my personal experience, what I struggled the most during in university courses was that I understood the materials, but when it got to midterm or exams, it was just the way the questions are, the language that is used for in questions or how to ask those topics. So I tried to go over many midterm or exam questions as possible, that I break it down for students saying, hey, this part is all jargon. It's really just asking for this kind of thing, like that. So yeah, I try to go over as many examples as possible. I think that's something I uh, put much emphasis on, as well as the fundamentals of the fundamental concepts and things like that. But we'll see how it turns out.
I think that's a good point because
I'm winging it.
I think a lot of the students often that trips up a lot of students is they probably know the material, but then sometimes the way a
Hmm.
question is worded, if they haven't been exposed to it or thinking of it that way before, that can be a challenge for them. So I think that's really great that you're trying to help improve that by basically raising awareness and
Hmm.
discussing it prior to the actual sessions. Okay, so I think we're getting close to the end of our time here. So, well, just ask a couple questions before we move to the audience questions. So, who is, or if there's more than one, some women in STEM that you look up to?
Yep, there are many women that I look up to. I'll start with my high school chemistry teacher, Mrs. Gail Peters, whom I still keep in touch with. She lives in Oakville, so not too far. She was very excited when I told her I became assistant professor in chemistry at Queen's. So yeah, Mrs. Gail Peters. I also love all the women part of this department. I think um, not to brag, but really like this department of chemistry at Queen's, the number of women that we have in this department is really amazing. Especially, this institute that's run by Jyoti, Megan, Emily, and Kathy, all these uh, females. It's really, I know I don't express it much, but it just feels very supportive environment. And what I've learned throughout my PhD and my postdoc is that uh, I tend to do my best, or I thrive the best in a supportive, positively supportive environment. So I know I'm in the right environment to do some exciting research and teaching as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Our department
Mhm.
here is amazing, and I'll echo to the Institute. We have some strong female leads at the top, but we also have a lot of strong female chemists, scientists within the
Mhm.
Institute as well. So I'm
Mhm.
going to agree and say those are who I look up to the most right
Yeah.
now, anyways.
Yeah.
So I'll just kind of end with this question and then we'll move to some audience question. What would your final kind of takeaway message that you would like to leave our listeners with today or advice?
Yeah. I guess what I've learned and what I'm learning so far is that um a lot of times your plan A doesn't work out. It's the other plan B to Z that ends up being the choice that you take. So be very open-minded, and um, whatever you're doing, be kind to others. I know that sounds very cliche. Help out when people are approaching for help. Like you said, it really helps to creating a supportive environment really starts with talking to each other, asking them how they are aside from science, right? So that we create that safe and supportive environment for each other. Um, yeah, and whatever you do, give your best shot, right? Sometimes your best is good enough, but to you, like you learn this is what you can achieve, and that just makes you a better person for next challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you for sharing all your experiences with us, Lucia. So now I'd like to open it up to the floor to the live audience. If anyone has a question, you can question or comment. Sometimes there's no questions, it's more of a comment. So feel free to jump into the conversation here. You can raise your hand or you can put it in the chat if you wish. Jody, I think I see you have your hand raised.
Just want to say thank you so much for sharing that. I think I learned a little bit about all of the challenges you faced. One of the things I just want to maybe a comment, but get you to maybe comment on this. We talk a lot about women in STEM, and I really like the fact that you brought up all of those other intersectionalities that you have had to face the challenge. You think as yourself as a woman in science, but then you think about yourself as not, coming here at the age of 12 and being able to write articulately in English, right, through peer review process. So I really commend you on that. And then the cultural shock, right? So coming from your upbringing from where you are, there are lots of norms to be successful in STEMs here in Canada or the US or even the UK, and just those cultural changes and being able to navigate them, right? I think it's something that we have to keep voicing again and again because it is a bigger challenge. One of the comments, I think last week, I forget when it was Women's International Day, we had a presentation and with a really great presenter. I really enjoyed listening to her. But one of the things that she said is that, networking is really important to success in STEMs or any field really here, in this
Mm-hmm.
this culture. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what people forget is that when you're not from this culture, and women particularly are not used to that environment, and it becomes an
Mm-hmm.
even bigger challenge. Forget the
Mm-hmm.
language barrier, but just that
Mm-hmm.
able to communicate when you're an introverted, you've been brought up in certain ways to actually be able to connect with people. So I think, find your champions, find your connections, like you said, your mentors, because we're here. We don't always voice that we're here. So I don't know if you wanted to comment on that. How did you overcome some of that?
Yeah, so I was a very shy graduate student, and I remember my PhD supervisor telling me, Lucia, you're doing science, that's important, but also communicating science is important, right? You want to tell other people what you're doing is very exciting, but that's something that you would have to work on. So I took that as a challenge, and at the time, the Graduate Student Association at McMaster University held a lot of these small social events where graduate students get together, and we used to have 3 minute research where it was at the grad student bar, and we would have one drink and we would talk to each other, and we have 3 minutes and we have to tell each other about research and to someone that I've never met, right? So that those little small networking events, coffees over coffees or donuts, whatever, those really going to those events and talking to a lot of graduate students and faculties really helped me to widen my network. So, it doesn't have to, you don't have to do like big things, but it's just those little small things really do help individuals in terms of networking, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, actually. I think it also more of a comfort zone if it's in those
Yeah.
small environment rather than being thrown right in the middle of
Mm-hmm,
doing a
mm-hmm.
huge lecture or a workshop
Yeah,
in an auditorium, right?
exactly.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think it is important. I think a lot of people are often shy, introverted, and it can be very daunting. So I think finding smaller spaces to do that first is a great way to do that. And it's good to be a little bit out of your comfort zone too. I think I forget who told me this at one point, but if you're not uncomfortable, then you're probably not growing or something like that. And I think it's true. Like you have to kind of push yourself a little bit, but it can be hard sometimes to get that push. So I think that's where then your support systems can come in and encourage you and help, and that's a big part of it. So I think that's all of our time for today. So I always like to end with a fun question. So Lucia, what is your favorite chemical element or molecule?
I love selenium. That's my
Selenium.
favorite.
Awesome. I think that's a new one. I don't think anyone else has said that one yet. So
Okay, good. Yeah.
awesome. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you
Thanks.
on the next session.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.